Hi, this is my first video on YouTube, so bear with me and we'll get through this together. On this channel, I'm going to be talking about films that have impacted me in varying degrees. Hopefully by watching this channel, you'll come away with some new finds and maybe I can even help you stay away from some others. The first film I will be talking about on this channel is Hard Times. Hard Times was directed by Walter Hill and was released in 1975. It stars Charles Bronson, Jill Ireland, James Coburn, and Strother Martin. This was director Walter Hill's first film. He was also a co-writer of the script. Up until this point, the biggest thing Hill had done was co-write the script for the film The Getaway, which stars Ali MacGraw and Steve McQueen. What's interesting about this film is that not only was it Hill's first film, but him having the background as a writer, this is anything but a writer's film. The dialogue is so sparse, there's no exposition. The main character, for instance, Chaney, we first see him riding into town on a freight train. That's it. He then gets off, comes across the street, but there's never a backstory. We don't know anything about him. We don't know where he's come from. And at this point in the film, we don't even know where he is. And as the film progresses, those questions are never answered. And the thing is, Chaney, played by Charles Bronson, is a tough guy. And is somebody who grew up, I was born in the 80s, child of the 90s. And in so many of those films, the character themselves, if they're the tough guy, they don't necessarily give you their background in a way in which like they're giving you their resume, but somebody else will. There's some type of exposition, like he just got out of prison, or supposedly at one time he killed a guy, or his wife just left him, he's down on his luck, he's this, he's that, or to either generate sympathy, fear, something. They got to create it. They can't just trust that the audience can do that for themselves. And Hill does that, which for somebody whose strength is their writing shows a lot of restraint. A lot of writers, especially when they write for film, can become very self-indulgent. You know, Aaron Sorkin comes to mind, the long monologues, and you can almost tell that the actors, when they're delivering the monologue, are thinking, this is my Academy Award moment. You can almost picture Aaron Sorkin when he's typing and thinking, oh, I'm really cooking now, I've got it, this is the one, this is all me. And Hill, for being able to restrain himself like that, is very admirable. And in doing research on Walter Hill, I found out he was a big Ernest Hemingway fan. And he subscribed to what Hemingway called the iceberg theory, which is the main point of the story should not be on the surface, but should rather shine through implicity. And he certainly makes that theory work for him in this film. The film is about a guy named Chaney, that's all he goes by, is Chaney, played by Charles Bronson, who gets into bare-knuckle street fighting. And unlike so many films that would deal with a topic so brutal and violent, this is a very, at times, poignant, sad. This is anything but a macho film. This is a film where it doesn't seem anybody wins. The fight scenes, you don't come away thinking, wow, Charles Bronson, what a guy. You feel sorry for Charles Bronson's character. And this film is centered in the Great Depression, at a time in 1933 when so many people of that time were beaten down. And the title, very appropriately, Hard Times, captures it. Because in that time in America, I guess you would say, you're either going to be tough or you're going to be dead. So people during that time period in this country, they didn't have to go around explaining just how tough they were. You kind of knew that they were simply because they were alive. And as we see him get involved in this world and we meet some of the shady characters, one of those is played by James Coburn. Coburn, again, delivers a strong performance the way he always does. And he's kind of the exact opposite of Charles Bronson's character. And he's somebody who what he lacks for in brawn, he makes up for in bravado. He's a survivor. What he has no virtues, only vices, and he's loyal to those. And the relationship they have is very unique in the film. Neither one of them really cares about the other one. They just know they need each other. they see the benefits for both of them. It's the perfect example of a quid pro quo relationship. And Coburn's kind of a hustler who's down on his luck, who can't seem to find a good fighter. Bronson's a guy who just seems like he was, to quote Nick Tosches about Sonny Liston, died the day he was born. So these two make a unique pairing. And what's funny is, even though Bronson's the tough one in the film, he's the one as an audience that we feel sorry for as the viewer. We empathize with this guy in a way that we don't for Coburn. We know Coburn is a survivor. And two, people even in this day and time that are in boxing, they don't come from wealthy families. And football players, a lot of them do, baseball players, basketball. But boxing's one of those worlds. If you come from money, why would you even get into that sport? And I heard somebody say, even on your best day in the ring, you get hit in the face. And this film really shows that these are people who do this because they have no other option. That's it. It's a means to an end. These are the cards they were dealt, and they just have to play them. And it's very interesting watching that and seeing it shot in that light, because this is about a year or two before Rocky comes out. And the fight scenes in this film are so brutal and so barbaric, and there's no music played. There's no, even though you're pulling for Bronson, you don't have that emotional feeling of victory when he wins, because it doesn't even seem as though he's won. It seems as though he's simply put off defeat for a little while, but he never is going to win. Victory is not something that's attainable for him, period. And this film really does a good job at not trying to pull those emotions out of you. The empathy is just there. And if you know anything about Charles Bronson, who's one of the toughest actors to ever come through Hollywood, in doing some research, I found out he was from Pennsylvania, was born in the coal mining area, one of those coal mining towns. Had a father that died when he was young, was the 11th of 15 children, worked in the mines himself, and used to have to wear his sister's dresses to school. Knowing that about him explains a lot of why, even though as tough and rugged as he is, your heart goes out to the guy the first time you see him. You just wish that he could have a moment where he's up here and not always down here. And I thought that was an interesting part of the film. Knowing that about his background, you wonder, was that a performance choice, or is that just something that's stamped on him based off of the life that he'd lived earlier in his youth? Jill Ireland, another character in the film who was Bronson's wife in real life, she has such a unique character in this film, in that she's this beautiful woman who also, like everybody else, is just simply trying to make it through the day. And she and Bronson, you know he's interested in her, but you can't really call it a romantic relationship in the film. She explains to him, she's quit believing in Cinderella a long time ago. She's no longer waiting for a Prince Charming or anything like that. She just needs a guy who can help with the light bill. And what's interesting is you never even hear her character's name mentioned in the film. I went on IMDb. Apparently she's Lucy Simpson. You never hear her called by her name. And she explains a little to him that her husband's in jail. She doesn't have much going, and she's not really interested in getting entangled with anybody. And Bronson just seems like he's happy for whatever time he can have with her. Wants nothing more, nothing less. And we don't really understand why it seems that they've both kind of given up on those things in life. They're not looking anymore. And yet, at the same time, you can't really make yourself believe that Charles Bronson's given up on it completely, because he was still interested enough to make inquiries into getting to know her. So it's like he hasn't completely thrown in the towel. He's still muddling along, but neither one of them have any delusions that this is going to lead to something bigger or something better. And the film in and of itself is truly a raw, bare bones, film. This doesn't play any scary music, no sinister things. There's, I remember seeing Escape from Alcatraz, where Clint Eastwood shows up and the guard says, "Welcome to Alcatraz," and lightning strikes. They don't do that in this film. And as I said earlier about the exposition and things like that, I think if you ever saw something like Roadhouse where they say, he killed a guy, ripped his throat out, or, you've got that intense look, don't mess with him. This film, none of that. And it's almost kind of the way I would compare country music today to the way country music used to be, when it was almost profoundly simplistic. That's what this film is. No smoke and mirrors, no gimmicky, obligatory scenes to try to elicit that response that they're just going to unabashedly go for from you. They don't preach down to you or talk down to you. And I appreciated that in watching the film. I saw it for the first time when I was 7 years old. It was a film my father had recommended, and I remember when I saw it, it was so the opposite of anything where normally the guy knocks somebody out and the crowd cheers and everybody runs to him. That this is really what life really is. This is not about escapism. And at times you almost feel like you're watching a documentary as it follows Bronson. There's also a minor character, but I don't know if any character can be minor if it's played by Strother Martin, called Poe. And he's another kind of societal reject in the sense that he had an opium problem. He's going to be the cut man. And he has one of the best lines in the film where he says, "Some people are born to fail, some have it thrust upon them." And that sums up everybody in this film. The only thing really that separates Bronson's character from the other characters in the film is it seems as though he has given up on ever expecting to get anything a little bit more out of life. He doesn't even know how to enjoy his own success. And there's a scene later where he's talking to Lucy, played by his wife, Jill Ireland, and he has kind of inquired about staying over. Or he actually, excuse me, that's not true. He goes by and she says, "Hold on, I've got somebody here, let me come out and talk to you." And they go outside and she explains to him that she's kind of moved on. She's found somebody who actually stays the night. And, he's dependable and basically letting him know that Cheney is not Charles Bronson's character. And he just pauses and looks at her and says, "Well, it sounds like you've got that all figured. Sounds like you've got it all figured out." And he doesn't say it with any animus. He just saying it matter-of-factly, like, "Well, you found what you needed." And she looks at him and says, "Is that really all you have to say?" And he just kind of, again, looks at her. Hill doesn't fill it in with some meaningless diatribe. He just lets Bronson's face answer the question in whichever answer we think that might be. We don't even know if it's an answer or not. He looks at her and then turns. And a lot of people, and especially now, even then though, are not daring to be that ambiguous. They don't want us as an audience to scratch our head and say, "Well, what's that supposed to mean? Well, did he see her again? Did he care about her? Why was he?" They leave those questions there. And toward the end, Charles Bronson, he has several fights in the film. I'm not going to get really into that because that's not really the important part. That's just what he does to make ends meet. This is more of about a story about loneliness, about people that are lost, about people who are simply trying to make it to the next day. So toward the end of the film, when he's gone through his last hurrah, James Coburn's character is seeing him off. And once again, Cheney's going on the freight train. He came in on one, he's leaving on one. And he gives each of them a certain amount of money. And they're surprised by this. He's being generous for somebody who came into town solely wanting to make money. And, just basically says, "Well, here you go. You forgot about the in-betweens," as he calls them. And at the very end, when he turns to walk away, like Jill Ireland's character, James Coburn's character, who is not one for mawkishness or sentimentality, gets his attention, says Cheney, and he turns around and he looks. And he's kind of standing, and he just looks at him and says, "Well, I feel like we ought to say something." And Cheney gives a little of a smile and turns and walks off into the darkness. And then they get into the car, he and Poe, who's played by Strother Martin, and Coburn lets him know he thinks they need to head down to Miami and get some of that good salt there. And then he pauses and just says, man, he was something. And that sums it up. They both know that they've seen something that they'd never seen before, they'll never see again. They don't really know how to put their finger on it, but they do know that what they have been a party to, is something that's very special and kind of beyond description. And not only in his ability, but in the kind of man that he was. Every once in a while we come across those that make those kind of impressions on us. And I think it's perfect that it ended with the guy who's probably the most cynical of all, the hustler, being the one who was kind of stupefied. He's seen it all, but he hadn't ever seen that. With that being said, it's something I think you should definitely see. It's worth your time. I hope you give it a shot. I'll be coming out with further videos lately, and they can only get better. Until then, thank you.